This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoy this critical thought, your daily discussion on game design. And be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and you can pitch future critical thought topics. We got a great critical thought for you today. We're going to be talking about multiplayer. Not multiplayer in terms of design, that's any number of topics and discussions we can have. We're going to be talking more about multiplayer in terms of architecture. Now, before we begin this, please keep in mind I am not a network administrator. I don't have a background in terms of building these kinds of things myself. I studied a little bit in terms of college, and I did 2 years of internet troubleshooting during the days of working at Comcast. For those of you watching this, if you have worked on multiplayer systems for games, especially architecture, and would like to talk about with me, I am more than happy to have a podcast or live discussion about it. But like I said, we're going to be focusing on the high level for this critical thought. And there's two aspects of it that I want to touch on. The first is the actual multiplayer options in terms of players or that kind of system and point of view. And then I want to talk about the actual architecture point of view. And again, we're going to stick with the high level. For both topics, we're going to start with the cheapest or the easiest and work our way up. When it comes to multiplayer modes, the first one is essentially play by email. This is a kind of a offshoot of asynchronous multiplayer, which we'll talk about next. Play by email has become a very popular option for strategy games. Any kind of turn-based design where you're basically going to be sitting around waiting for someone else to make their move. Play by email has become a popular way of being able to play these games without locking you in front of your computer while you wait for someone to decide. Especially with complicated strategy games like Civilization, Europa Universalis, and other games where it can take, who knows, 10 to 20 minutes sometimes even plan out your moves when things can get very complicated. Over the last few years, we've seen examples of play by email from other games such as Frozen Synapse, even older with Laser Squad Nemesis, Soleum Infernum, and I'm sure a lot more. How play by email works, in its basic form, is whenever you make a turn, you basically set the play by email as its own mode. And what happens is, once you've made your turn, you get a file that you can then email to your players. And what happens is, in some cases, everyone who's playing your game, it could be 2 players, could be 6, 8, 10, it all depends on the game, everyone mails their file to everyone else. And these files are all placed into a specific folder in the game that essentially will extrapolate and run the turn through all those files. And then once it's been done, the game will load the next turn, and everything that everyone else has done will be shown. And then this repeats. I make my turn, I get my file, I email it to everyone else, and we go on until the game is done. In more advanced cases, instead of having to email players, this could all be handled through the game's server. In this case, the server itself will handle the extrapolation and the uploading and downloading of these files. The same rules apply, of course. I basically don't have to sit on my computer and wait for you to make your turn. I submit my file, and then I go do something else, and then I'm notified when it's time. One of the advantages of play by email, of course, is because we're not operating in real time, you can have different games being run at the same time. Again, since it's all handled by the files and being transferred, you could have multiple play by email games running, as opposed to, again, just one turn-based mode that we all have to sit around and wait for. With that said, play by email really can only work with turn-based games. You cannot play a real-time game through email, although that could be very interesting if anyone wants to design that. Now, as I said, the next step up is asynchronous multiplayer. In this case, this is the old school way of I go, you go. And we typically see this with the very first console games and arcade games for a time. In this way, I play, and then once I die, the next player plays. When he or she dies, we switch back and forth, until, of course, we're either beat the game or we've all ran out of lives. Because you're not playing directly with the player, there's no real need to have two-player or multiplayer functionality. Of course, with that said, this is very limited and is not really seen these days. Now, the next one, of course, we have certainly have seen and is still popular, and that is co-op or player versus the computer, player versus the AI kind of play. Again, close your eyes, pick a game, and it probably has this in some way, shape, or form today. Everything from the likes of Monster Hunter, Left 4 Dead, Payday 2, Call of Duty. Again, the list goes on and on. When it comes to multiplayer design, again, we don't have the time for that today. And like I said, if you have a suggestion for a particular topic, be sure to leave it below. But when it comes to multiplayer design, building your game around co-op and understanding and extrapolating those systems out as early as possible is always the best case. And that will become a major point when we get to the second part of the critical thought. The next step, of course, is player versus player. Again, close your eyes, pick a game, and it probably has it. This is where we get into the idea of multiplayer architecture and what we'll be talking about next. In terms of multiplayer modes, of course, we can get bigger and grander, 32 on 32 plays, MMOs, etc. But again, that's too big to get into detail about in this critical thought. Now, the second half is going to be more about the multiplayer architecture. And for those of you watching this, again, if you're a game developer, you've probably already considered this or even studied or have done it before. This is the part that's going to be mainly for either consumers, enthusiasts, or students / first-time developers who may not have thought about this before. As I just said, when it comes to multiplayer design, the earlier you start planning for this in your game's development, the easier it's going to be. And as we've talked about before, you're not going to design an entire full-fledged multiplayer mode in 1 week, no matter what anyone says. Unless you're maybe a part robot or a cyborg or augmented human, but even then it may still be difficult. As we talked about with multiplayer modes, we'll start at the easiest and work our way up. And when it comes to multiplayer, the first step, of course, is TCP/IP or direct connection. What this is players will connect directly to each other or to their respective networks via IP address. The IP address, of course, is your connection or your kind of address from your ISP. Now, if you're using a router, you may have an IP like 192.168.1.1, but the ISP will usually provide you with an IP address that's tied to your MAC address, or that's kind of your physical or network connection from your modem, which unfortunately my modem is kind of connected right now, so I can't show that off. TCP/IP is the simplest way, like I said, of connecting. Again, you're giving someone your IP address, they're giving you yours, and it's just a direct line. It's also in terms of hacks and, kind of giving out too much information, that kind of deal. If someone knows your IP address, they can basically find you or know where you are in the world. It's that classic line that you hear in just about any kind of like cyber thriller or shows dealing with the internet or cybersecurity. They're going to trace the IP address. Because of that, it's pretty much considered the quick and dirty kind of multiplayer architecture. The only game I actually played that made use of this was Risk of Rain from a few years ago, and it was a pain in the butt to get working. And because of that, most developers will not use it and will go for the next option. And that is a client-host model. This works on a similar theory or a similar kind of setup. In this case, the host is the person who is hosting the game, and the clients are the people who are going to connect to the host to play. Payday 2 would be the most recent example that I know of, but I'm sure there are other ones out there today. What happens is you're basically bypassing the need for a server. Instead, let's say that my hand here is the host, and you have clients all around who will connect to that host to run the game. So the host itself will manage the downloading and the uploading of data. What that means from a connectivity standpoint or a speed standpoint, or I'm sorry, a ping standpoint, is the host will usually have, very good connection. And it's the players themselves who are connecting which will essentially affect the stability or the ping of playing the game. The problem with this kind of client-host architecture, of course, comes in the fact that it's basically going to be based on location. For instance, if I'm located in New Jersey, East Coast United States, if I were to play with people in Pennsylvania, New York, or of course New Jersey, we're going to have very stable connections. But let's say I have friends in the UK or Australia or Japan. No matter how fast their connection is or how great mine is, there will be serious latency issues. And this makes it very hard to play with people because of the fact that we're basically dealing with the host's download and upload speeds. If I don't have a good internet connection, I can't really host games, nor can I really play them as well, because of the speed it takes to send and receive those files. The other risk of host or client, wow, my mouth just completely went out, of the client host kind of architecture is the fact that it does leave itself very open to cheats, mods, and hacks. Because we're not dealing with servers, either hosted by the developer or hosted by someone else, all the data is stored server side or client side. That means it's very easy to mod those files, make it, give myself a million experience, unlock all kinds of weapons, skins, etc. And because there is no server that's serving as anti-cheat, it makes it very easy to do that. This has been a major issue that Payday 2 has had with people, hacking their game, getting all the achievements, weapons, infinite ammo, stuff like that. And at this point, it's far too late for Payday 2 to adopt a server structure. They do have anti-cheat software, but it only works for people connecting to someone's game. It doesn't stop someone from from hacking or modding on their end. The next step up are servers. These are servers that are either hosted by the developer or owned by them, or third-party servers. Now again, I'm not a network administrator and I don't have first or second-hand knowledge for how the servers work. But it does work in a similar sense as to the client-host kind of model. In this case, you have servers and they can be set up anywhere. Just about in every state there are, or in major states, there are server warehouses. And these warehouses can have who knows how many servers, which someone can, rent, and they essentially can load up whatever games they want, and you can play them through connecting to that server. For developers of major multiplayer games, they will probably buy or rent servers around the country and even around the world, depending upon the reach of their game. As with the client-host model, again, you're going to be connecting to these to play your games. The only difference is that instead of connecting to someone's computer, you're connecting to a server. And again, the server itself will handle the download and uploading of data. Now, the advantages of this is that this is a more secure way of running multiplayer. Because if you're dealing with a server that's being owned or ran by the developer itself, there's going to be anti-cheating software, any kind of stuff like that in place. This also allows you to have a sense of control or community. During my days of Team Fortress 2, there were many servers that were set up by groups of people, fan groups, teams, clubs, whatever, and they basically play the maps they want. They can hang out with their friends, they can have custom maps, rules, etc. And it basically allows for these communities to be built. The other advantage is when you have third-party servers, it extends the game's lifespan beyond just developers. If the developers decide to pull all their official support, there will still be third parties set up that you can play with. And again, this allows for a far greater pool of games. Now, the disadvantage, though, of these third-party servers is that it really can become kind of like the Wild West. You never know what you're going to play with or what maps are hosted until you sign on. And it's still considered acceptable to have developer or first-party servers set up. But of course, there is a cost to that. Again, I don't have the first-hand knowledge on those costs and setting things up. Now, the next step up is the evolved or the much grander version of that, and that is the MMO scale. This one, we're not just dealing with servers for 12 players, 64 players. This one, we're dealing with servers set for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of players. At this stage, this is the grand one. And for most of you watching this, especially if you're an indie developer, you're not going to be doing this. But it is important to mention it here for the sake of completion. When we're talking about MMOs in this grand scale, this is when, again, the costs, I certainly don't know what it is, but I'm sure it is a lot. When it comes to this kind of architecture, chances are, as a developer, you're going to have a team specifically in place to handle server maintenance and running things. This is not something that you can just leave to chance, because remember, if your servers buckle or they have to be taken down for maintenance, you have hundreds of thousands of people who are going to be yelling at you. And when it comes down to this, this is when there's a lot that becomes important here. The servers that are going to be running these games, again, for hundreds of thousands of players, sending and receiving data in milliseconds on this scale, there's going to be some of the most powerful servers on the planet. This is also where the concept of shards or different regions come into play, because you can't, in most cases, you can't have literally everyone in the world on one server. If that server crashes, oh my god, what could happen? And then this is where the idea of backups come into play, redundant servers in case one group of servers fails or has to be taken down. And again, the logistics and the work that goes into this is way beyond my pay grade, basically. And like I said, for anyone who's worked on servers at this level or this capacity, I would love to talk to you either live or record about the work that goes into it. Like I said, the upside of this is, again, when we're talking about games of this scale and magnitude, if it works, you're going to be having a whole lot of money coming in. Again, World of Warcraft has probably made more money than most of us will ever see in our lives, times 100. The downside, of course, again, is the cost that goes into it. And this really sets up a kind of like a burning our ship when we arrive into the new land kind of situation. Because of the cost that goes into maintaining and operating these servers, you really need your game to be succeeding in order to justify this cost. And this is one of the major things that led to a lot of the other MMOs crashing and burning. Because unless you are making enough money not only to pay all the developers, but to handle the server upkeep and costs, your game is simply going to crash. And when we reach this point again, it is high risk, high reward. And again, this led to the MMO rise and that craze of the last decade, and why we saw so many, drop out. But again, we are approaching 20 minutes, and that's another topic in of itself. There really isn't anything to summarize for today's critical thought, because again, we're dealing with a very complicated topic. But again, when it comes to developing your game, like I said, the earlier you start thinking about this and deciding whether or not to have multiplayer, the easier it's going to be to implement it and add to your game. This is why we don't see too many games, they're fully released, they've had a year of support, and then they decide to add a multiplayer mode. Because again, when you start having to prepare the architecture for your game, the net code, that's another topic easily. These are all things that can really snowball out of control if you don't make the necessary plans early on. And like I said, you have different options available depending upon the scope and the player base that you're looking to achieve. Again, as we go up from TCP/IP to client hosts to servers and so on, this really is going to affect the amount of players you want to have. And again, if we're talking about grand scale or even just like a medium scale game, 6 on 6, 12 by 12, 32 on 32, stuff like that, you are going to have to look into servers. And having those in place, again, is way beyond today's critical thought. Now, before we end things, just a few random topics I want to quickly touch on. I noticed on yesterday's video that my hair was sticking straight up out of my headset. And that, my friends, is the early warning sign that I need to get a haircut. If I don't get a haircut in like the next week or so, I'll start to look like that guy from Ancient Aliens that everyone has made those memes on. Also, for those of you who've been watching the Bloodborne streams, I hate to say, but you missed a really good one last night, as I am now set to get my first Platinum trophy in the game, and that will sort of be the perfect ribbon for the Bloodborne Let's Play once we get there, which, who knows at this point. But anyway, thank you so much for watching today's Critical Thought. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe, and of course, if you have a suggestion for a future topic, make sure to let me know below. Once again, I am Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Be sure to check back daily for more content here and on Game Wisdom. Anyway, that's going to do it for this almost extra long Critical Thought, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.